There is a strong effort by those on the political left to reshape the perception of our nation's founding, placing greater emphasis on areas more aligned with the political agendas. The traditional viewpoint is that of our founding fathers taking a stand against a global superpower to establish a nation built on the ideals of freedom, self-determination, and limited government. Ideals that stood the test of time. Ideals that helped make our nation the leading destination for global migrants. Ideals that have not always been practiced or afforded equally. There is no denying that our history contains eras of slavery, racism, and other forms of discrimination. For too long, our society did not practice what it preached. People of color, especially Black Americans, have not always been viewed as equal. Not always treated with the same consideration as others in society. The connection to America for many date back to slavery, which helped foster resentment and disenfranchisement over the years. Black Americans tend to have the worst outcomes of any group. There still is a need for some in our current society to look at this group as people. Equal people that simply want opportunity to work hard and contribute to society. The reason why I believe it is inaccurate to paint our current society or even our founding as racist is because of the lack of perspective those applying that label have for our society. Our current society is far less racist than past generations, despite a few rare episodes that make the headlines, which were daily life back in the day. Overlooking or minimizing the continued progress our society makes is politically convenient, but far from accurate in the reviewing our society. Looking back at our founding principles was not racist. The visionary view of what America could be was not restrained to the current conditions, not reflective of such ideals. The reason why visionary leaders are highly regarded is because of how they can lay the foundation for future, despite the conditions of the present. Again, political convenience is applied when applying values of the present to behaviors numerous generations ago. What was globally prominent then is no longer accepted today. The world changes every day of every year. Looking back in disgust is more of a petulant practice rather than a complex understanding of growth in society. There is still room for improvement in our society. There are some changes needed that are not the fault of society, but personal adjustments needed by those seeking benefit. Here is my proposed idea to ensure government does not permit bias in public services that can take the lives of those it is charged to protect or bring to justice. America took a big step forward with the passage of the First Step Act, which delivered much needed criminal justice reform. Now, society needs to take the next step. The disturbing tape of the arrests that lead to the death of George Floyd reignites the anger stemming from deaths during arrests, especially when this one clearly should have been avoided. Police officers deal with people in their worst moments, where one can understand how emotions can intensify. Even in these moments, the core principle of due process must be protected. Law enforcement is tasked with serving and protecting our communities by enforcing laws as well as removing certain suspected criminals while they proceed through the system. Law enforcement is not tasked with serving as judge, jury, and executioner. Regardless of how obvious the guilt may be, every accused person is guaranteed the presumption of innocence. There is a clear need to expand changes in tactics that help certain agencies reduce their fatal incidents nationwide, so more officers can bring in suspect alive. Better criteria for selection and improved training may help further reduce incidents. Better educated and trained cops will be better able to defuse situations and act under tense circumstances. Some research studies showed a correlation between the level of education required for police officers and the number of complaints filed against the departments. During the surge of hiring officers in many of our cities, leaders reduced the criteria in order to get more qualified bodies on the job, rather developing the pipeline. Some of these studies argued that the training learning from criminal justice programs combined with academy training helped officers better control emotions and function in tense situations. Additionally, policymakers should review how tactics and procedures can be updated and standardized to better help preserve life. There are some people that simply want police to stop arresting alleged criminals, but that does not serve the public's interest, if these people did in fact commit a crime. The impact of unintended consequences of public policy needs to be considered as interactions between non-criminals and the police can increase the level of distrust. Public policies like the controversial stop and frisk programs administered in cities like NYC help expand issues, as many African Americans with no criminal backgrounds were stopped and frisked. Another area of concern is how many governments utilize law enforcement as revenue-generating agencies, devoting actual budget line with projected revenues raised from citations and fines. Like stop and frisk, the push to increase revenue will lead officers to focus heavily on areas with higher crime statistics, which will create more unnecessary encounters with people over minor infractions. The push for more tickets, fines, and arrest numbers will lead police officers to unfairly harass non-criminals simply because of There is great fear for people, especially people of color, with entering the criminal justice system, where the odds can be stacked against them for these minor infractions. Our elected officials must ensure that all people that come in contact with law enforcement have fair treatment and those first responders do not let personal biases impact their civic duty. People with proven records of holding any biases should not hold these roles, but it's utopic to think it can be completely weeded out. There are people of all races who hold biased views. People are human and may make mistakes without the intention of discrimination. The focus should be ensuring that justice is served uniformly. The men and women that serve and protect our communities are heroes, despite a few rare incidents. The rare incidents have big impacts, so it is important that society addresses it appropriately. Another goal for society should be reducing behaviors in communities that will lead to greater interactions with law enforcement, rather simply asking police to look the other way. While targeting is an issue, African Americans come in contact with police more often than not because of poor personal choices and behaviors that either violate laws or others in the community. Improving investment in some of these communities with domestic manufacturing might help push more people away from criminal endeavors towards legitimate jobs, reducing interactions. There is clear need for change. Let us take the next step in ensuring equal protection under the law truly does exist and not just a political talking point. Society already took an important first step. Recap. All people should be able to empathize with members of the African American community, who struggle with the feelings that their lives are not viewed as valuable. Life is different in America for people of color. As a biracial person myself, neither side is white, there is a clear different experience. The benefit of the doubt rarely falls in our favor. At least in my viewpoint, not as an excuse. All must work with the cards that are dealt to them. There will always be someone better off and worse off. That is life, but there are opportunities to at least treat each other with equal consideration. Respect the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness afforded to all by our founders. In some past controversies, there was evidence showing the victims' actions contributed to the outcomes. Still, one rightfully should question why there was not a more compassionate outcome. I have the utmost respect for law enforcement and our military. But, society must hold those accountable who do not live up to the laws of society or expectations of the role they serve in society. While we all can understand the anger felt, these feelings do not serve as justification for the rioting, looting, and violence taking place in many cities. Some may call the questioning of the rioting a distraction, but the added pain, suffering, and death is a legitimate focus. Ends never justify the means. Many of the people who saw their businesses destroyed, their place of work burnt to ground, and family members assaulted do not deserve to be the victims of petulant anger. Our fellow citizens are not acceptable victims or sacrificial lambs for misplaced anger. Many of these people already suffered greatly from the recent pandemic. Should every race destroy public and private property every time there is a conflict involving two different races? Where was the rioting and looting after the violent attack in the nursing home? There are people organizing legitimate peaceful protesters. There are others exploiting these events to create chaos for their own agendas. Rioters and looters are not protesters but criminals. The politicians, media members, and celebrities promoting and funding their efforts are shameful. One has to question why the riots. Government's officials are handling the situation appropriately and are prosecuting the officer involved. Not a result of the protest or hooliganism but justice. All people should be treated humanely, even in their worst moments. People should also treat each other humanely and respectfully, even in the moments of great anger. There should be agreement that all people in our society should be treated humanely even in their moments and worst behaviors. People enforcing the law should behave better than the people they arrest. While many people focus on the areas of conflict, there is a need for introspection and a look at how some in our communities can make better choices to have better outcomes. The narrative that all social problems impacting the black community stem from slavery and discrimination is not completely accurate, as many originated closer to modern day. There is a need to push forward towards a society that views people equally, affords them equal access to opportunity, and remove policy and bias advantages some are afforded. We all can contribute to a more fair, equal, and productive future. Policymakers can ensure all can contribute fairly and benefit equally based on the best efforts and